The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
So, every once in a while, I do like to take a peek at the actual ratings and reviews of the podcast and just try to get a feel of what things, maybe if there's a consensus, something I could be doing better on the show. That's a way to find out. I take constructive criticism quite seriously. We had a number of reviews, okay, not a number of them, but a handful, and I think a couple people may have even sent a tweet that was like, hey, here's something to think about really trying to move some of the miscellaneous stuff to the middle of the show instead of all of it right at the beginning. I thought that was a good idea. Shorten the opening segment. So I think we've done a pretty good job of that. We still have some shows where the opening part gets a little bit long. I generally apologize for those when they're happening, but, it's days where we got a lot of stuff to kind of set the table. I think Mondays tend to be those types of shows where we're kind of setting up the week ahead. But I got an interesting bit of feedback, and I'm this is not me mocking it in any way. This is interesting to me. Someone wrote that they felt like we don't admit our mistakes on this podcast. And I don't know that I fully agreed with that. I think you obviously, as a host and when you're interviewing guests, one of your main job is to make guests as comfortable as possible. So focusing on areas of their expertise is kind of our mission. For me personally, I didn't go out on a limb all that much the first two opportunities I had early this most recent season, and then we started the podcast about a month into the previous NBA campaign. And so, this last year, I pushed pretty hard on guys like Thad and Niko Mirotic, and I pushed hard against drafting injured guys like Kawhi Leonard. So I felt like overall, those three things were kind of the main pieces of advice that I gave. And then obviously there's thousands of individual things like, okay, here's a guy we're looking at. Here's what he did. Maybe he doesn't pan out after a week. But in those cases, I think I've already sort of said in advance, hey, if this guy doesn't pan out, we're going to cast him back into the ocean. So I don't think that, and maybe I'm just misremembering because I do, 52 weeks in a year, 5 shows a week, 260 shows every year, that there are some things that I said that were just flat out wrong. And I don't know that I want you guys to just hammer me with all of them, because I'm sure there's at least a few. But if there's something that I'm totally misremembering, like, yeah, I think I probably undervalued Jamal Murray last year. And I've said many times that I foolishly bought the hype on Aaron Gordon last season. I got caught up in that hype train. It's why one of my big pieces of advice at the end of the year was don't ride the hype train. You're going to end up disappointed, because it happened to me. I did it. So I've definitely goofed. I don't know what I'm trying to hide here. If it seems like I'm trying to hide something, I apologize, folks. I take your responses very seriously when they're well thought out and not just someone like Dan's an idiot. Although that person may have a point. But if it's if it's constructive criticism, I always am willing to at least take it. I don't know how much I'm going to change necessarily, but anyway. So if there's something out there, and folks, if you're on Twitter, feel free to send me a note. I don't care, man. I have minimal dignity left at this point in my life. So if there's something you feel like I did wrong that I've been trying to cover up, you can hit me with it, man. I'll retweet that joint. I'll send it off into the internet. It's like, yeah, you're right. I biffed this one. But I don't feel like I've tried to hide these things. So if it comes off that way, I apologize. If many of you feel this same way, then I apologize even harder. But if even one of you thinks that I'm doing something disingenuous, then that makes me very sad, and I regret it. So hopefully, if you're listening out there, person that wrote that well thought out review, this was clearly something that was thought through. Then I'd like to do better for you. To everybody else who maybe you disagree, maybe you agree, let's rock, baby. We are coming down the chute here. September the 19th, we are well under now, a month from NBA opening day. We are 3 weeks and 6 days away. Oh, man. I can feel it. September's only a 30-day month. We're coming down the chute, man. We're coming down the chute. Oh, I love it. Here's what we got coming up. So here I said I was going to do shorter openings, and then I got sidetracked by that stuff. We're going to talk to Philip Rossman-Reich a little bit later on in today's podcast. He, of course, handles a lot of what's going on at Orlando Magic Daily. And I'm really excited about this interview because the Magic are a team. We love these clunker teams on Fantasy NBA Today. How much time the last few years have we spent just hammering, just really lasering in on Brooklyn 2 years ago and Phoenix this last season? Just the worst, the most nauseating, viscerally ill-making teams to watch in the NBA. And we just stared them down on a nightly basis, trying to find some fantasy value. And the Magic, frankly, they're not that bad. They have some good players on that team, but it is a little bit of a mishmash in terms of how all the numbers shake out. So we'll ask Philip about that. We've got mock draft recap of the Hoop Ball Forum mock draft. In fact, they only went 10 rounds in that one, so we can just wrap it up today. We'll go 7, 8, 9, and 10. 1 through 3 we did on Monday, 4 through 6 yesterday's episode, along with a chat with Lakers sideline reporter Mike Trudell. If you haven't had a chance to enjoy that one from yesterday, I hope you'll just let your podcast player keep going, because it'll probably just go to our last episode after this one. That was a lot of fun. And, of course, everybody's got a coupon code. If you listen to the rest of this episode, you can find out which coupon code is associated with Philip Rossman-Reich's interview here on Fantasy NBA Today. Here's what I think we do. It worked out well, I thought, 2 days ago, where we got into the draft a little bit and then took a little sidebar, just when it felt like we were going to get overwhelmed by draft stuff, and talk to Philip. So, without further ado, Oh my God, I almost forgot to tell you guys. Holy moly, we got a big contest going at Hoopball right now. My Lord, I almost forgot to mention it. Make sure to follow at Hoopball Tweets, like now, the second you listen to this podcast, because today only, there is a tweet that we send out from at Hoopball Tweets, not Hoopball Fantasy, Hoopball Tweets, where if you quote retweet it, it's a little contest. You can see the rules in the tweet that we sent out. You have a chance to win a free draft guide. And if you already bought the draft guide, if you win the contest, you get a free season pass. And all you have to do is send out one quote retweet. It's so easy. And if 250 people do it, and I think we're about halfway there, if we get the other half of the way there, as this contest started yesterday after I put out the podcast, if we get to 250 entrants into the contest, then everybody that doesn't win will get access to a crazy cheap discount on all the stuff we sell. Like, out of this world, as low as the first day that we made it all available, like the crazy, you had to be paying close attention over that first weekend to figure out it was happening kind of deal. So please do, get involved in that. It's a fun game. It's called Guess the Rank. You're being asked to guess the rank of Donovan Mitchell in the Brewski 150, 8-category format. That's what you got to do. You got to quote retweet it with a guess of what Donovan Mitchell's rank is in Brewski's 150. And if you guess it right, you win a draft guide. It's an $18 product. Yeah, almost forgot to tell you guys about that. Okay, so make sure to follow that. Now let's talk. Let's talk mock draft. Okay, enough of this other nonsense. Round 7, I'll read them through. Wendell Carter Jr., DeJounte Murray, Tim Hardaway Jr., Nick Batum, Markelle Fultz, Lou Williams, sweet Lou, Dennis Smith Jr., Yusuf Nurkic, Jonathan Isaac, Brooke Lopez, Enes Kanter, and DeMarcus Boogie Cousins. That's 73 through 84. Quick thoughts on all of those. We're going to move a little bit quicker on today's pod because we are into no man's land a little bit. So this is a spot where, as you guys remember, around pick 70 to 80, I feel this is where you should just go get whatever guy you're targeting, based almost exclusively on which of your target guys you think is going to come off the board first. Early in a draft, rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4 in particular, people tend to draft pretty close to the ADPs of guys. Not always. Remember, we found some weird ones in those first 50. but it does tend to work in parallel a little bit because the ADPs and the projections from these big box sites, Yahoo in particular, I think does a good job. They're pretty close, especially the first 20, although the second round is weird these days. You don't want to just go snatching up guys, around number 100 in the fourth round. There's too many guys before that are going to come off the board. But by pick 70, if somebody's ranked around 100 in the system, that's a perfectly fine time to go take them. You just want to get your guys at this point. Go get them. Because the guys pre-ranked 70, I don't know who they are off the top of my head. I don't have that window open right now. But there's about an equal chance that they'll end up at number 70 as the guy ranked at number 90. It's very close. Minimal. You don't want to reach all the way. I mean, if you have pick 74 and you take a guy whose projection is like 160, it's probably too soon. You don't have to, right? Because that guy's probably not going to come off the board in the next 12 to 15 picks. But if you're eyeing somebody who's like around 95 or even 100, and you're worried they're not going to get back to you, you take them in this spot. This is where you start doing that. So Wendell Carter Jr., yeah, I mean, people believe in him a little bit more than I do as a rookie season kind of guy. And I still think that he's going to have to play his way into minutes in Chicago. So, not my cup of tea. Just going to say that. You guys know how I feel about rookies. But I also think that there's an opportunity for him. He could be okay. I think there's guys with better early season upside still available at this point. So I don't hate it, but I don't love it. DeJounte Murray at 74, I think this is probably earlier than you'd have to take him in most formats. I think he's going to have a nice season, but I think they probably could have waited longer. So I like the pick, I just don't like where it happened. Timmy Hardaway Jr. at 75, I think he should have a really strong time in New York until Kristaps comes back, and then maybe more. He's coming off a bit of a down season by all accounts, although it's a weird blend there for Hardaway because he put up bigger numbers in New York than he was putting up previously outside of that last little burst before he hit free agency. But he was also hurt for long stretches last year. His shot wasn't dropping for long stretches. This is, I think, about where he's going to end up going. You could probably wait a tiny bit longer, and he's not a guy I'm necessarily targeting, but I think he's going to put up some pretty good scoring numbers this year. Nick Batum at 76, he's been falling more than this. So he's another guy, much like Murray, where I like the pick, but I don't 100% like where it happened. I think, and some of this comes down to the fact that this is a hoop ball forum mock draft, so everybody knows who everybody else is targeting, and so you go and you get them a little bit earlier than you'd have to. I think you probably could get Batum in the 8th round in most drafts, but I'm not that upset taking him in the 7th because he's a guy that now that Dwight Howard is gone, if he's healthy, big if, he has an opportunity to get back to that 60-ish range that he was in the past. Markelle Fultz at 77. Adrian Benjamin is just going nuts with these young guys, so whatever. It's a flyer, man. I think they're, it's a high upside guy, so I guess I'll give him that. Adrian, you're just doing this so that I can poke fun at you on the podcast, I think. Lou Williams at 78. That's a pretty reasonable spot for him. He's not going to go on a run like he did last year. Clippers have a lot of options. I think guys like Avery Bradley end up with slightly better seasons this time around. Patrick Beverley is going to be around, so that's more point guard minutes that are getting soaked up. They come into this season healthy, so Lou Williams' role is really going to be more of a gunner and less of a facilitator, which is part of what made him so valuable last year. He was piling up assists in addition to the scoring, the threes, the free throw percentage. It was an extra bonus. So all that being said, I do like him better than the next pick, which is Dennis Smith Jr. I haven't seen enough from this dude to think that he can wipe away his percentage deficiencies. And in a 9-cat format, turnovers, percents, that's 3 out of the 9 categories where he could actually be a drag on your team. Nope, no thank you. Yusuf Nurkic at 80. I like that he's falling this year. Last year, he was a hype train guy, and whereas I got fooled by the Aaron Gordon hype train and I rode along with it, I did say I thought Nurkic was going too early last season. By the way, I think I'm allowed to do this, right? Because, I don't know. Now, today I feel bad about crowing when I get something right. Yusuf Nurkic was one I did get right last year. I said he was getting overdrafted. He'd only shown us like a 20-game span where he was posting top 30 numbers. He doesn't shoot free throws well. He's stone-fisted. He's inconsistent. Now he's fallen too far. Now he's a guy that has top 50 upside, but he's getting picked 80, 90. Is a wonderful center to be able to grab this late. Jonathan Isaac at 81. This is another guy where I like the pick, but I don't like where it happened. This is too early for him to come off the board. He's a guy that a lot of people are not looking at. You could let him fall. Brooke Lopez at 82. Love it. Great center, coming off a bad year. He'll be a nice fit in Milwaukee. Wonderful center to be able to get in the 80s. Much like Nurkic, and much like the next guy, Enes Kanter. This is almost too late. Enes Kanter at 83. This is a top 50 season last year for him. Easy. I mean, he coasted into it, and there's no Kristaps. There's nothing standing in his way in New York. He's going to have a strong year. I like it. It's a good pick, and he fell a little bit farther than I expected here. Boogie at 84. It's a head-to-head league, so we'll let that one slide. Roto, I'm not touching him. Head-to-head. If you're willing to sit on a dead roster spot, which to me is curtains on your team, there's a decent probability that teams that draft these stash guys fall so far behind they end up having to drop them anyway. So I rarely recommend going with the long season stash. But if you think you can handle it, go for it. A lot of good picks in that round. Weird spot to take them, but a lot of good picks. Round 8. Buddy Hield, Dwayne Dedman, Zach LaVine, Steven Adams, Goran Dragic, Mario Hezonja, Harrison Barnes, Jordan Bell, Dario Saric, Darren Collison, Jabari Parker, and Julius Randle. That's 85 through 96 in the Hoop Ball Forum slow mock. Buddy Hield at 85. I like that pick. I think he's going to have a nice season. He was a guy that, as you recall, we were pretty high on here at Hoop Ball towards the end of last year. Now he's going to try to carry it over. Not a ton of things have gotten in his way, so I'm going to give this one a check plus. I like that. Dwayne Dedman at 86. He's a guy that's been injury prone. I'm starting to trust him less and less. And I think the Hawks do want to move. I think we all know the Hawks want to move towards John Collins playing more. Eventually, he's going to have to be their center, even if it's not right out of the gate. But he'll be, I think, a safe center in the early part of the season. Just not much upside, and the floor could fall out at a moment's notice. So to me, I would have probably taken a bigger risk at this point in the 80s, 90s, this range. But hopefully he'll hold down the fort for this team for a little bit. Zach LaVine at 87. I think this is a pretty good spot for him. If he can get his shooting percentage back up, he could climb back into that 60 range where he was in his Minnesota year. And I'm willing to take a shot on that. He was actually going to be one of my keepers in a keeper league, and I think I talked about this on last year's podcast. It was late at night. I did something stupid. I had Zach LaVine in 2 different leagues, and I dropped him in the keeper league when I meant to drop him in the redraft league. But luckily in that keeper league, you could only keep 2 people, and I've got 2 other guys on my mind. One of them, by the way, Taurean Prince, who got drafted real late and dropped. That worked out for old Danny boy. Steven Adams at 88. He's a nice, strong center, but he does have that big free throw percentage hole in his game, so you have to be kind of aware of what you're getting into here. Still, you can't argue with getting him in the late 80s. He's better than that. So, good pick. Goran Dragic at 89. He's finally falling to where he should have been going for many years. Dragic kept getting drafted in the 40s and 50s, and his stat profile just sort of never panned out to that. Now he's getting drafted near 90, and he's probably going to put up a top 75 season. So another guy, to me, I like this pick coming off a little bit of a down year, if you can call it that, but he's very consistent. He's a high floor, low upside point guard that you can get in the late middle rounds. So this is a nice grab. Mario Hezonja at 90. This is fine. This is the perfect spot to take a flyer on a guy who's going to a new situation, who posted really strong defensive stats when he saw playing time in Orlando last year. On the hope that maybe those translate. I don't know that they will, because it was kind of a short-term burst for him. But, screw it. There are no guarantees on the board once you get to number 90 in a draft. So take the guy that could blow away his ADP. There's a chance. He might be a disaster, in which case you dump him. Pick up somebody hot. I like it. Good chance take here. Good spot to take one. Harrison Barnes at 91. He's the opposite side. He's the zero chance player who, to me, is just beyond boring. I'm never going to end up with Harrison Barnes because all he does is give you decent free throw percentage and some scoring, and that's about it. Especially on a Mavericks team that's slowly looking like it's starting to move away from the old guys. And he's not even that old yet. Harrison Barnes, Wesley Matthews, Dirk Nowitzki, J.J. Barea. Is Devin Harris back in Dallas now? I think he might be. Jordan Bell at 92. This is a nice flyer pick. All right, Adrian, you get my blessing on this one. Flyer pick, young guy. Maybe there's more minutes in Golden State as long as Boogie is out. If he goes nuts for 3 months, you'll be happy. Cool. Dario Saric at 93. That's about right. He's got center eligibility, which I think is part of what makes this a stronger pick. He's not going to give you traditional center stats, but he does fill an opening in your roster for a difficult spot. And he should be fine. He's going to play mostly power forward in Philly, but he's going to put up okay numbers. It's probably similar to last year. I don't know that there's a whole lot of room for him to do more. Darren Collison at 94. He's one of my old guys going late in drafts that I kind of like. Put him on the check plus list here. He always falls farther than he should. Jabari Parker. Maybe there's some fear, by the way, on Darren Collison's side. Perhaps there's some fear that Tyreek Evans is going to take away from Collison. I'm not really afraid of that. He was so efficient and so smart in that Indy offense that I think he's going to continue to get his minutes. Jabari Parker, yeah, this is another screw it pick at this point. What happens? Maybe something great happens. He was absolutely kicking butt prior to his injury 2 seasons ago, way above number 95. There are going to be shots in a wide open Chicago offense, and even if he doesn't play a lick of defense at this point in the draft, you're getting near 100. Take a guy that could have some upside or could, piss down his leg, basically. Julius Randle, kind of a similar thing at 96, although the difference here for Julius is that he is all popcorn. All popcorn. With the exception of field goal percent, but just like nothing on the defensive side. Horrible per 36s on steals and blocks. He's going to be a pretty high turnover guy. He can't shoot free throws, and he does get to the line, so that hurts you there. But he's center eligible in a lot of leagues, so grain of salt. Okay, let's take a quick break from looking at the mock draft. I want to get you guys into the interview with Philip Rossman-Reich. Really interesting stuff on the Orlando Magic. We had a lot of questions about how the minutes were going to get divvied up on this team, and I thought Philip did a wonderful job of kind of cluing us in on how that happened. Here we go. This man needs no introduction because you've heard him before. We got all these guests that are coming on either for the first or second time, and I'm like tiptoeing around some of my questions. I don't want to offend anybody. But you, Philip, I will offend you all damn day. Philip Rossman-Reich, welcome back to the pod.
I don't know whether to be excited or concerned about that, Dan.
Both. A weird blend of both, my good man. Philip Rossman-Reich, he is, of course, of at Magic Daily, OrlandoMagicDaily.com. We're covering the Orlando Magic on today's podcast. You can follow Philip, by the way. I think I'd been giving out the wrong Twitter handle on previous shows, and you never stopped me. But the correct one is PhilipRR_OMD. That one doesn't roll off the tongue quite like the other one, but PhilipRR_OMD. He's covering the Magic. We have a lot of questions, but before we get into those, how you been? It's been a couple months.
I've been good. Yeah, I know. My Twitter account's a little confusing. Even if you go to the old one, I'll respond with the right one, so don't worry. My tweet deck is a mess.
Yeah, that tweet deck kind of fries my laptop, which is only like a 2-year-old machine, and it just chunks its way through when I've got all these things going. And plus, everybody's got to put an animated GIF in their things these days. It's chaos. It's like dancing unicorns on my screen. I can't keep up with it. I don't know how you do.
It's during games, especially. It's like, am I watching the game? Am I watching TweetDeck? Sometimes I don't even know anymore. And sometimes I prefer to watch TweetDeck than the game.
Isn't the NBA Twitter amazing, though?
It's the best. It's so enriched the experience. Like I think the NBA has greatly benefited from the age of Twitter.
Yeah, social media in general. I saw, and this is obviously not what we're going to talk about on today's show, but we're in it now. I think I saw a stat that the NBA social media presence is like triple any of the other major sports, including the NFL. That seems amazing to me. The NBA has taken over, man. This is what we've all been saying for years, but no one's believed us. And now there is proof in the social media pudding. I don't know, it's kind of exciting.
I think the NBA has been really, really smart knowing who their fan base is. A lot of their fans are people who would be on Twitter and on social media, and they've been really smart about letting people use their footage. I mean, NFL is really tight and controlling over its footage. The NBA pretty much said, use it. We don't care. As long as it's not anything bad we don't want, go ahead and use it. So,
yeah.
You find highlights everywhere of the NBA, and they want that.
I think it's a wonderful model. It helps create this superstardom that NBA players can attain that, I don't know, outside of generally quarterbacks in the NFL, I can almost think of nobody else that attains that level of like heroism that players in the NBA get. It's pretty sweet, and it's kind of cool to cover because like they do have a voice, as we've seen, and they're so marketable because everybody has a face. Everybody has these highlights circulating. Anyway, this is a long conversation for another day, but clearly you and I agree on it, and that's what we like. We like to start off on the right foot like this. So Philip, of course, covering the Magic. We have a lot of questions about them. This is the era of the guest on Fantasy NBA Today. I had to sneak that into every podcast this week. And I figure, much as I've said to the other guests on the pod, this is a time of year where folks are concerned about minutes and usage. We're all trying to figure out who to draft and where to draft them. So can I just sort of machine gun you here, names from the top to the bottom, and you can tell me what to expect this season?
I with this Magic team especially, I don't know how many answers I'll have for you, but at least I can give you a little outlook on a team that I'm sure a lot of your listeners don't really know about. And I mean, who knows? There might be some interesting guys on this team that, someone's got to score for this team. So that, there's certainly something to look at here.
Yep. Well said. I mean, listen, I watched more Brooklyn Nets games 2 years ago than any man ever should. I watched more Phoenix Suns games the last 2 years. That made me viscerally ill at times. But these are the teams where you can find diamonds in the rough. These are the teams where you can find the guys that are getting overlooked a little bit, maybe because they don't have a glowing name or a ton of background, or maybe they're wink, wink, nod, nod, coming off of a kind of a down season before. And so with that, let's open up with a look at the Magic, two guys on the Magic that I would argue are both kind of coming off of a down season. One of them because the numbers just never quite got right, the health never quite got right. The other one because there was a large midseason injury that derailed what otherwise seemed like it was going to be a great year, especially from a fantasy perspective. And that's Aaron Gordon and Nick Vucevic. Am I pronouncing that right? I got to get this one right. Is it Vuce?
Yeah, Vucevic.
Okay, good. Vucevic, I hear, and Vukovic, I know that's not right. That's a different sport, I think. So let's start with Vuce, because on a per-game basis, he was the guy last year. He's putting up a fantastic season, and then, it kind of came apart a little bit. He, looking at
Sounds like the Magic season overall.
Yeah, you guys actually got off to a pretty good start last year, right?
8-4 start, everything seemed to be going great, and then it's gone.
And then it was gone. Vooch, by the way, the number 27 player on a per-game basis this last season, but only 57 games played. Incredible year, by the way, if he could have stretched that out to 75 games. 16.5 points, 9 rebounds, a steal, a block, a three-pointer, 3.5 assists. He shot almost 48% from the field. He was 82% at the free throw line. He was under 2 turnovers a game. This was like, it was all coming together, and then injury. This year has a little bit of a different feel because it seems like the Magic have kind of finally pulled the plug on whatever they were attempting to do before, and now it's reset time. How does that impact Vooch this season?
Yeah, I think it's a big impact. I mean, you said the full season stats. Let me give you his stats before the injury. 17.4 points per game, 9.3 rebounds per game, 3.3 assists per game, 1 steal per game, 1.1 blocks per game, less than 2 turnovers per game, shot 34.3% from beyond the arc, making almost 1.5 threes per game. This was a guy, honestly, Vucevic was playing some of his best basketball right before his injury. Orlando had a lot of injuries going for them throughout the year last year, and Vucevic stepped his game up and really was playing really well. And yeah, the Magic weren't winning, but Vucevic was doing everything he could. Even defensively, he was playing a whole lot better. And there was a lot to like about him. But then the injury hit, and he never quite got right when he got back. He was never quite the same, certainly not defensively. It felt like everything had fallen into place, and then just like that, it's gone. It's done. And again, that was kind of a symbol of the Magic season overall with all the injuries that they faced. Vucevic, I think, is still a really reliable guy. You know what you're gonna get from Vucevic. Near double numbers. He's probably going to improve his 3-point shot a little bit this year. Probably took it a little too much, especially toward the end of the season. But you're right. The writing does feel like it's finally on the wall for Vucevic. A big thing with Vucevic this year is he's on an expiring contract, number one. So it's not his future is very uncertain. And adding on top of that, Orlando drafted Mohamed Bamba behind him to groom him eventually to be the starting center. I don't think there's any doubt the Magic envision him starting at center at some point. Then you add on top of that they still have Kem Birch, Timothy Mozgov on the roster. And now you got 4 centers on the roster and really only time to maybe play 2 or 3 of them. My expectation is Vucevic is going to start the year at center. I don't think Bamba's ready to play heavy minutes. We'll probably talk a little bit about him later on in the show. So I think Vucevic is going to get the majority of the minutes, especially at the beginning of the season. But as we inch closer to the trade deadline, you're going to hear his name come up. And I honestly think by February, the Magic are going to pull the trigger and finally move Vucevic out of town and finally kind of give the reins over to their rookie in Bamba around that time. And so I suspect if you're looking to get Vucevic in a fantasy league, you're getting him for his early season numbers. You're probably not going to rely on him toward the end of the season, because toward the end of the season, when he gets traded or likely gets traded, he's probably going to be coming off the bench. And even in Orlando, I suspect that's when his minutes will begin to decrease, because Orlando's probably going to be out of the playoff race by then, and they'll want to see Bamba play a little bit more.
Yeah, I was going to say it's purely speculation, but just, in kind of a ballpark term, it doesn't seem like there are that many places a guy like Vooch could end up that would be better than what the Magic can provide for him at the beginning of the season here, because he really is their most reliable option, maybe on both ends of the floor at times. And a guy like that getting traded, probably not to a team that's going to run him out there for 30 minutes and tell him to take 15 shots a night. So it is, unfortunately, it's this guy that's like, it's an incredibly safe 3.5 months and then a very risky 2.5 months on a season. That's a tough thing to balance from a fantasy perspective. When you got a guy like that, I try to preach in general that you can't draft based on what you think is going to happen at the trade deadline. But with a contract like it, I mean, he's vastly underpaid, it would seem.
Yes. And honestly, it felt like he was vastly underpaid even when they signed him. And he's gotten better since then. But when the Magic re-signed him to that contract, it was just like, whoa, that's a good job by the GM. And Rob Hennigan was not a guy that the Magic would end up saying that's a good job by the GM very often.
Yeah, well, you know what? If it makes him feel any good, he's got a feather in his cap, and they now have a team. They now have a player on that team. You mentioned him, Timofey Mozgov, who the Lakers signed for $16 million a year. So you got both ends. That's
only because the Magic signed Bismack Biyombo for $17 a year and traded him for Mozgov.
True. Well said. Good point. Touche, Philip. That is well placed. Again, talking to Philip Rossman-Reich of Orlando Magic Daily. You can follow each of them on Twitter at @OMagicDaily. I did it in reverse order, and at @PhilipRR_OMD. We started with Nick Vucevic. We're going to move to Aaron Gordon. This was the wink I mentioned before. This is a guy that last year, I would argue from a fantasy draft perspective, and I don't know what this, how this translates to reality, but just sort of reading the tea leaves and watching the chatter, I don't know if anybody had more hype going into fantasy draft season last year than Aaron Gordon. And whether it was injuries, whether it was a weird volume shooting, you'd have to argue last year was a little bit of a disappointment. So this is just the kind of guy, Philip, that I often target the following year, a guy with just infinite potential, coming off a season where it just seemed like nothing went right after about the first month. But I feel like no one remembers that first month. He was really good coming out of the chute before 9 concussions or whatever he went through last year.
I mean, it's interesting you say it like that because when I look back at Aaron Gordon's season, and maybe it's because I'm not looking at it from a fantasy perspective. From a fantasy perspective, I can see why people are a little sour on Gordon with the way he ended the season. But when I look back at Aaron Gordon's season last year, I see a guy who had a breakout season, who finally found his place on the floor, that proved that he can not only be a good basketball player, but a really good basketball player, a guy that, maybe has that whiff of stardom about him, that he could be a potential future all-star. Now, I agree, he's got a long way to go. The inefficiency and the inefficient shooting that he had toward the end of the season was definitely very, very concerning. I kind of viewed it as growing pains, as a guy trying to do a little too much, I mean this in the absolute nicest way, and I don't mean to get the Kobe stans angry at me, but it felt like he was trying to play like the way people stereotype Kobe Bryant and saying, this is what a star has to do. I have to isolate guys and take mid-range jumpers and kind of will my team. And that's not really who Aaron Gordon is. And so I think part of the problem last year was he really didn't know how to be the guy at the top of the scouting report. And he tried to force his offense a little bit too much. And so the hope is that he's learned a little bit of his lesson, and that next season he'll look more like the beginning of the season, where he was taking, in rhythm 3-pointers and making them at a high rate.
Yeah, he shot like 50% at the beginning of the year.
Through his first 25 games, I think he was shooting 40.9%, near 41% from beyond the arc, averaging 18 points per game. This is a guy who can put in baskets now. I mean, he's a guy who can rely on to score, and I suspect he's going to be the leading scorer for the Magic this year. The question for him is finding the efficiency. Can he be an efficient scorer? Can he be a little bit more of a playmaker? He averaged 2.3 assists per game last year. Not much of a passer, but can he learn to add that to his game? Is he going to be an all-star next year? I mean, if the Magic surprise everyone and they're good, it's likely because Aaron Gordon has taken that next step. Is he really that close to being that kind of a player? It might be another year before you get there, but Gordon certainly has the potential. I think he's going to be the leading scorer on the Magic this year. I think he's probably the most important player on the team as far as this year goes. The question for him is, can he take that raw scoring production and turn it into efficient scoring production? And I think that's a big question for him entering the season. The Magic are going to give him every opportunity to do so. I think the Magic's success or failure as a team is really reliant on that question.
Yeah, you have a better memory, by the way, than most, I think, fantasy enthusiasts, because they're going to probably remember the March and April where...
Yep, the last 19 games where he shot 28, 29%.
Yeah, something like... And 50% at the free throw line, too. The free throw numbers dropped
rattling off that stat all... I've been rattling off that stat all summer. I've been really breaking down Aaron Gordon's game and trying to figure out, whether he is... Magic fans want another all-star. It's been a long time since we had an all-star, and trying to figure out what's real or not with him. And, I kind of look at it as, again, Gordon going through some growing pains. He has to learn what it takes to be the guy at the top of the scouting report. And the one thing I know about Aaron Gordon, and I think that this was especially true last year, you give Aaron Gordon a full summer healthy to work on his game, he will get better. I have every belief that Aaron Gordon will be a better player this year than he was last year, mostly because we haven't heard of any injuries that he suffered. I don't think he's a guy that's going to get his contract and rest. This is a guy that's going to keep working, and we've seen him put in a lot of work over the summer.
Yeah, he's to me, these are the guys. They have there's a slight depression, I think, because everybody ended up drafting Aaron Gordon at 40 last year, and then he put up this and that was part of this hype train thing. And he ended up in the 60s, and then he ran into injuries and so on and so forth. And I just feel like he's going to be a guy where you see that there's a tail off, where people are like, he left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth end of the year. So I love targeting guys like that. I think he's one of my favorite guys on the Magic this year, simply because the hype train kind of had to slam on the brakes. People overcompensate. That might be the word that best describes the situation. We saw it with Victor Oladipo last year, someone who I think everybody hoped was going to put up giant numbers in Oklahoma City. It didn't happen, so then he fell, and he ends up in Indiana. Everybody was drafting him late, and he turned out to be just an absolute stud. So let's talk about some of the guys that maybe have a little bit less name recognition on the Magic. The guys that could find their way into minutes. That, I mean, a team generally can have more than two fantasy relevant players, especially if none of them are really chewing up all of the usage on the floor. I'd like to say let's start with the obvious stuff and move to the less, but I don't know that there's a clear pecking order here. So let's do point guard, because we haven't talked about that yet.
Oh, boy, let's start there.
Is it DJ Augustin? Is that the guy?
If you ask me today, DJ Augustin will be the starting point guard for the Orlando Magic this season.
How long does that last? All year?
I think there will be moments where he's not the starting point guard. I really think it's going to be a by feel thing. It's going to be sort of point guard by committee. But knowing Steve Clifford and his history as a coach, he prefers veterans. And I think the reason why the Magic felt comfortable going into the season with the point guard situation that they have, which I think most people would probably say is the worst in the league. It's certainly one of the worst in the league, if not the worst in the league. And that's no offense to DJ Augustin. I think Steve Clifford likes the solid play from the veteran that he'll get from DJ Augustin. Augustin's not going to do much flashy. He's probably going to get you 7-8 points per game, hit a couple threes, get a few assists, but really he's kind of there to spread the floor because the Magic don't have a lot of 3-point shooters and bring the ball up and just kind of make sure everyone's in the right spot, not necessarily to create or do anything special. I think there will be points where other players start, like say if Jerry Grant gets on a hot streak and plays really, really well for a stretch, he'll get some opportunity there until he doesn't, and then they'll go back to old reliable. I would also keep an eye on Isaiah Briscoe. That he played in Estonia last year in the Russian league, and was pretty solid over there. Was an all-star over there, and we don't really know what he's going to do in the NBA, but he's a scorer. That's what he did at Kentucky. That's really what everyone thinks he'll be able to do in the NBA. The question is, can he add that 3-point shot to boost that scoring? And can he be an NBA point guard? No one really knows because no one's really seen him play at an NBA level yet. But I keep an eye on him as well.
Okay.
These are all waiver wire guys, probably, if you're really asking that question.
You got a starting point guard. I could take a flyer on him maybe late in it. What about Evan Fournier? Is he still the shooting guard there? Does he still have a pretty good lock on those minutes? You guys did give him a decent contract.
Yes, yeah. I think Evan Fournier is a pretty good lock to get major minutes. Obviously, leading scorer from the team last year. He's someone to me that is just really reliable. He's increased his scoring average over every year in a 6-year career. Really the question, and I think he'll probably average around 17, 18 points per game again this year. The real question with him is his efficiency. That's bounced up and down over the course of the year, over the course of his career. 2016, he shot 40% from beyond the arc, playing off of Victor Oladipo. That worked really well for him. Take Victor Oladipo out of the lineup, put in that weird mishmash lineup that the Magic had. He shot 35.6% from beyond the arc. Bring in last year where you have Aaron Gordon, who carried a lot more of the scoring load. He went back up to 37.9% from beyond the arc. So I think Fournier, so much, like I said, is kind of, for this year at least, is tied to what Aaron Gordon does. If Gordon takes that next leap, I think that helps Evan Fournier a lot, but too, because obviously it'll give him more space to be a 3-point shooter.
Nice. Give
him maybe an easier time attacking, because I think Fournier is really good attacking off of a ball reversal rather than kind of a straight pick and roll or straight one-on-one play. But Fournier, I think, is really kind of ensconced in the lineup. It's going to be tough to trade his contract, so I don't anticipate that happening. But he's just a really solid, reliable scorer for Orlando, and I think that he's going to kind of play that role again this year.
Okay, a lot of names here to fill in the forward bucket, and I guess you could call them like wings, forwards, even maybe some center time.
They're all forwards. We don't differentiate between the 3 and 4 here in Orlando.
The whole NBA is a bunch of forwards these days, so who cares? Okay, Jonathan Simmons is one. Terrence Ross is another. Stop me if I say anybody, by the way, that's no longer on the Magic, but I'm pretty sure all these guys are still there.
We didn't do very much this offseason, so it's hard. It would be hard to miss them.
I know, but somebody might have had a contract that expired that maybe I forgot.
Gotcha,
I think Aaron Aflalo is done, right?
Aaron Aflalo is no longer with the Magic.
Okay, he's no longer with the Magic. I got that one right. So far, I'm doing okay. Terrence Ross, Jonathan Simmons, Jonathan Isaac, Mo Bamba, who I guess he's a center at 7 feet, but these young guys, they can move a little bit better. Who am I missing, and who do you like and who do you dislike in that bunch, plus whatever you add to it?
Well, you got the rotation guys. The only guy you're missing there is Jarrell Martin, who the Magic acquired from the Memphis Grizzlies over the offseason.
Oh, yeah, I like Jarrell Martin.
Yeah, he's interesting. I was watching some tape on him. He's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't, if you're in a super deep fantasy league where you're drafting like a 30-team league with 15 players per team, you might want to keep an eye on him. But I don't think those leagues exist except for the crazy one that I'm in.
If you're going 450 deep, you better look at him if you're going 450 deep.
Yeah, but like. That's generally the forward rotation, I think. Jonathan Simmons and Terrence Ross probably going to fill in a good chunk of those backup wing minutes, possibly even getting some starter minutes. Jonathan Isaac's going to kind of float between the 3 and the 4. He'll get his opportunity to start because he's really important for this team. Jarrell Martin, I think, is going to get a lot of minutes at the 4 and get a good look at the 4. And then you got Kem Birch, who can play center, but the Magic might try him at the 4 a little bit to fill in minutes as well, especially if Bamba shows that he can shoot a little bit. And then they have 2 really good defenders in Birch and Bamba in the paint. Some other guys to keep an eye on are the young guys who really, really unproven. Melvin Frazier Jr., second-round pick, and Wesley Awundu as well. 2 guys that are really, really similar. They're not great shooters, really, really good defenders. But they'll probably fill in any minutes that are left over on the wing.
Full disclosure, I wanted to let you pronounce Awundu before I tried to say it. I wanted to make sure you gave
Make sure you got it right.
That's right. I mean, I watched a YouTube video on how to pronounce Svi Mikhailiuk before I did a Lakers podcast on it. So I really should have been better prepared on this one. Some of the young guys up front, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but a guy like Mo Bamba, there's a lot of hype coming out of college for a guy like that. Pretty high draft pick. He's the guy you're thinking maybe takes over for Vooch late in the season. Is that somebody you'd consider sitting on for most of the year, or are the minutes going to be so low for the first couple months that it's just like having a dead roster spot?
I mean, I know when I play fantasy, I try not to get overhyped on the rookie. So if you're toward the end of the draft and he's still on the board, take a flyer on him. I mean, he's a guy who averaged nearly 4 blocks per game, and especially if the Magic do slow play him and play him against bench players, he's going to have plenty of opportunity to rack up some easy blocks and probably score some easy baskets in that way. I don't anticipate the Magic are going to play him super heavy minutes until the end of the season, or really until he's ready. I mean, maybe he's more ready than y'all think he is, and he'll immediately demand minutes because he's just that good defensively. I mean, I think that's really his key to playing time, is just how good defensively he is right off the bat. The fact of the matter is, at Summer League, and always take Summer League stats for what they're worth, but this one I think was really, really telling. Orlando only played him for 19.7 minutes per game in Summer League, less than 20 minutes per game. He played less than half the game in Summer League play. Those are only 40-minute games. Because he's still kind of building up his strength and building up his frame, it seems to me that the plan for the Magic, or at least what they kind of showed at Summer League, is they're going to take things really, really slowly with him. His minutes are probably going to be really inconsistent. It honestly wouldn't surprise me if there are moments where they play Kem Birch ahead of him or Timofey Mozgov ahead of him, because they want the solid play. They want the solid play that you get from a veteran, and they just want to make sure that he's comfortable and in position to succeed. So this year is probably not a big statistical year for Mo Bamba. Now, he could prove everyone wrong. His impact could be so great that the Magic have to play him, that he's clearly the better player. And certainly I think the Magic have an impetus to play him, but I don't think he'll see a ton of minutes, especially early on in the season. I think he'll slowly, gradually ramp up, but I wouldn't expect him to play even toward the end of the season after the Magic have been eliminated from the playoffs and he's clearly the guy. I wouldn't imagine seeing him play more than 25 minutes per game. I think the Magic are just going to be very, very careful with him and the amount of workload they give him this season.
All right, last one before I let you go. Magic win total 31.5 feels kind of high, but listen, you're down on the ground floor there. You know what's going on. Is this a team that's going to be trying to win 32 games this year?
I think they're absolutely going to be trying to win games. I thought that the analysis that I saw last year about this Magic team was really apt. They're too talented to just outright tank. Evan Fournier is a good player. Nikola Vucevic is a good player. Aaron Gordon is a good player. Jonathan Isaac, who we didn't talk so much about today, potentially is a good player. Certainly a good player defensively to start off with. I think that the overall culture that they want to build is, yes, we're trying to win games. And I actually think that 31.5 number is pretty right on the money. This is a team that won 25 games last year, but they lost more than 200 games to injury before the injuries really hit them hard. And the injuries hit them hard the entire season. They were 8-4, talk of the NBA. They were starting to slide down. You could see the slide coming, but this was a team that figured to at least be around the playoff conversation if maybe Jonathan Isaac didn't get injured in November like he did last year. I don't think they're a 25-win team like they were last year. I definitely think they're better than they were then. I don't know how much better they are because they still have a lot of issues they need to resolve. They're still relying on a lot of unproven players. There's still a lot of question marks. It's not a team I'm willing to bet heavily on. And I think 31.5 is probably right at the number. If you told me I had to pick an over-under, I'd probably take the under because of tanking shenanigans at the end of the season. But I don't think it's anything on purpose. I think this is a team that's probably a low to mid-30s win team at its best.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Not particularly confident in it, but I lean to the under as well. It does seem like at the end of the year when teams start to go young, you give away a couple of those wins, those are the ones that can get you to that number.
Although the Magic the last few years have tried to tank toward the end of the season and accidentally won a few games and cost them some draft position. I think they're hoping the better draft odds for those teams help them out this year.
Yeah, do it right. If you're going to tank, you might as well,
they tried. That last game against the Wizards last year, they closed against the Wizards last year. Aaron Gordon's sitting out. Nikola Vucevic is sitting out. The Wizards are playing their starters, at least for the first half. It really felt like the Magic were trying to lose that game, and the Wizards were like, "Nope, we want the 8 seed. You have this game." The Magic beat them and won it anyway.
And the Wizards lost in the first round regardless. So
and that win took the Magic from a tie for the third best odds in the lottery to 5th, and that's how they ended up drafting with the 6th pick in the draft.
That leaves a little bit.
Oh, it hurt everyone. It was the second straight year that happened.
Gut punch. Philip, I gotta say, you are never surprised by questions I ask. I thought maybe I could catch you off guard with the season win total stuff, but you're Johnny on the spot. He is Philip Rossman-Reich of Orlando Magic Daily. Again, follow him on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. You can follow Orlando Magic Daily on Twitter at OMagicDaily. The website is OrlandoMagicDaily.com. My man, thank you as always.
No problem. Thanks for having me on, again, as always.
Oh, you know what? I forgot one thing. Then I officially get to let you go. We're attaching a draft guide coupon code to every guest we've got on the podcast over the next couple of weeks. So we got to do one for you, Philip. It's $3 off the Hoop Ball draft guide. You get to pick the coupon code. Give me something in 5 characters or less. Bamba?
Let's go, I would say wingspan or length. But I don't think those are 5 characters.
You know what? Actually, wingspan is solid. I like wingspan.
We're doing do it. As Jeff Waltman said on draft night, Magic's president of basketball operations. Long night, long players.
Wingspan, ladies and gentlemen, is your coupon code. It's $3 off the Hoop Ball draft guide. It is Magic style. Philip, once again, for real this time, thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
That was Philip Rossman-Reich of Orlando Magic Daily. Love talking to that dude. We'll get him back on the podcast soon here. We're not going to leave these long stretches in between visits from old PRR. Wingspan, the coupon code for the draft guide. We'll remind you of that before the podcast comes to its conclusion. Let's jump back into the mock draft and finish up the Hoop Ball Forum mock draft so that we can get into the industry mock draft. We got a lot of things to talk about. Round 9, picks 97 through 108. Brandon Ingram, Larry Nance Jr., Thad Young, James Johnson, Serge Ibaka, Kyle Kuzma, Josh Jackson, Evan Fournier, Tyreek Evans, IT, Trevor Ariza, and Rondé Hollis Jefferson. Brandon Ingram at 97 makes me a little bit nervous. We haven't seen enough from him yet to really believe that he's turning the corner, especially in free throw percentage. Another guy that gets to the line and then clangs them. But the other parts of his game have come along, and as you heard on yesterday's podcast, Mike Trudell, he really believes in Brandon Ingram's ability to improve his game. His work ethic is just through the roof. So, take a shot. It's hard for me to pick holes in picks in this 100 to 120 range because in a worst-case scenario, you just dump them. You just put him out to pasture. Let him roam the countryside. Larry Nance Jr. at pick 98. I'm okay with that. He's right around number 100 every single time we talk about him. Thad Young at 99. You guys know I love my Thaddeus. And if he's really falling to 100 again, awesome. Because he just coasted into top 60 value last year. Better than we ever expected. And almost nothing should change his game this year. Just the same role. Don't tell me McBuckets is going to cut into Thad's minutes. That is a great defensive player. He gets very little credit for this. I think he was second in the league in deflections last year. I know he was top 4. James Johnson at pick number 100. He was a guy that really laid an egg last season. He was a guy we're pretty high on here at Hoop Ball. A lot of folks, I think, were believing in the 1-1-1, a 3, a steal, and a block, and he just looked slow and lethargic. We've heard these weird rumors that he was playing through injuries, but to me it sounded like excuses, after the fact stuff, because he just didn't look good ever. From day one last year, he looked slow, and I just wonder if maybe he's actually slowing down. Like the next man on our list, Serge Ibaka, very much slowing down, but if you get him in the hundreds, fine. He'll get you 1.3, 1.4 blocks a game, probably. Okay percentages. And he has these, 30-day sprints where he posts top 30 value, so maybe you could even flip him during one of those, where someone's like, oh, Serge is back, and then Serge is not back. Kyle Kuzma at number 102, I think this is probably around the right spot for him. He probably goes, I believe, a little lower in overall value. Now, this is going to depend a bit on durability. He's going to get nice looks around LeBron James, but I feel like there just isn't quite enough meat on the bone to justify a Kuzma pick. He's not going to have those opportunities to blow up for 25, 30 points as often this year, if at all. He's going to have fewer shots. They're going to be better looks, so the efficiency is going to be better. But, he's not going to be out there doing as much rebounding. He really doesn't do much on the defensive end. In fact, fantasy-wise and reality-wise, he wasn't very good on the defensive end. So maybe he got stronger. Perhaps that'll help a little bit. But he's a guy I love as a Laker fan. But from a fantasy standpoint, I'm just not that excited about him. Same deal for the next guy, Josh Jackson. To me, he feels like one of the dudes in Phoenix that's going to get squeezed by the addition of more veterans. Trevor Ariza, TJ Warren, who's not an old guy, but he's been around for a couple of years now. Ryan Anderson. These are all guys who play at positions where Jackson could have maybe found some minutes. And he's not going to get minutes at shooting guard because that's going to be Devin Booker, most likely, unless they slide him to the 1. I guess. Maybe you play Josh Jackson at the 2. It's just too many chuckers. And he had a nice stretch at the end of last year, but he's young, and his shot selection was not good, and his passing was not good. I don't think there's a ton of room for him until at least very late in the season. And if you gave me the choice between him and the guy drafted right after him here in this mock, Evan Fournier at 104, and you heard from Philip Rossman-Reich, Fournier is staring down the barrel of basically the same season, and with health, he was a guy that was top 65 on a per-game basis. Pretty easy for him to get back to that spot. If he stays healthy, you're looking at a guy who could post top 50 numbers this year. I really like Fournier falling into the hundreds. This is a nice kind of proven asset that's falling. Those are my favorite guys. They're not exciting, but proven assets that fall are ways for you to get startable players late in a draft. These are the types of guys that can go on 1 week or 4 week or 5 week runs where you pair them up, go 2-for-1 style. Even better. Tyreek Evans at 105. Yeah, you might as well take a flyer on him at this point. IT at 106. Sure, fine. I don't think he's going to do a ton in Denver, but, screw it. Again, I think there's a lot of picks in here where you can throw him under the screw it category and just see what happens, especially because it's a mock draft here. Trevor Ariza at 107. This is earlier than he's going in almost any draft I've been in. This is someone who probably listens to the podcast because I was like, hey, what about Ariza? So 107, I'm fine with it, but I think he'll fall faller for you. He will fall farther. I can do this, guys. I've been doing this for a little bit. In your individual draft, I believe he will go later than this. And Rondé Hollis-Jefferson at 108. He's a guy whose fantasy game I don't fully understand. I think we all have those guys out there. For me, it's everybody on the Sacramento Kings and Rondé Hollis-Jefferson. I never know what to expect from him, but at 108, this could be fine. This could be an okay pick. Kelly Olynyk. Oh, here, we'll start round 10. We'll just do them all straight through. Kelly Olynyk, Derek Favors, Bogdanovich, Mo Bamba, J.J. Redick, Kristaps Porzingis, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Alan Crabb, Andrew Wiggins, Freddie Van Fleet, Danilo Gallinari, and Jaylen Brown. And that gets us to the end of this mock draft, round 10, picks 109 through 120. Kelly Olynyk at 109, I'm okay with that, although, we saw him really take shape when Whiteside was out. I think he'll post another okay season, and if Whiteside gets moved anywhere, then he's really in business. Derek Favors at 110, he showed he can play alongside Rudy Gobert last year, so I like this pick. I think he's a good late-round center to take a flyer on. Bogdanovich, we didn't see quite enough for my taste of the other stats. It was mostly threes for Bogdan, a smattering of assists, not a ton in the way of steal percentages, stuff like that. But if he does show improvement, and this is a guy that's been playing for a little bit, he's fine. At 111, this is a good spot to take a shot at him. Mo Bamba, you heard from Philip actually earlier on this very same episode. He doesn't feel like Bamba's going to be a big deal until middle to late in the season, so you may have to be okay with sitting on him for a bit. J.J. Redick at 113. He's another guy that falls into my old guys who've done it before, but they're not exciting category. I mean, he's a guy that just walks into top 75 value on a per-game basis. He's probably going to miss some games, so if you have a number of guys that all fit that category, maybe this is a spot where you avoid taking another injury risk. But for the games he's out there, he's very good, and he's going to play. He's going to play. They love what he does. He's a floor spacer. He's a very good shooter, so he doesn't hurt your percentages. He doesn't do anything on the defensive side, but, in the 10th round, you don't have to get a guy who's going to give you all the stats. They're just not there. But throw him into that same bucket. Old guys getting underrated. Old guys, O-G-G-U. Ogu. The Ogus. We'll call them the Ogu bunch. Maybe that'll be what we stress this season. Maybe I won't have the Besbris bunch. Maybe we'll have the Ogu bunch. Old guys getting underrated. I'm an old guy getting underrated, so close to my heart. All these guys we're talking about are about my age. Watched them all play. As an undergrad, I watched them all play in college. Why I'm going to put them all on my fantasy team is anybody's guess. Kristaps Porzingis at number 114. In a head-to-head, this is a totally fine spot to take him, but like I said, in Roto in particular, but overall, I don't like stashing long-term injury guys. I don't necessarily believe that he or Boogie will play during the regular season. When someone's like, well, they should be back by January or February, that leaves a lot of wiggle room for the team to just be like, we suck. We don't need to play them. Or, if you're the Warriors, we're awesome. Boogie, you can play 10 minutes this week and 14 minutes next week, and we're just going to weave you in here as slow as humanly possible. Scares me. KCP at 115, he was a nice grab last year. I think his role is going to be vastly diminished now with LeBron around and the development of Josh Hart and other young guys. So he's someone that I've mostly been avoiding. Lakers in general, I've mostly been avoiding. Alan Crabb at pick number 116. He's coming off a really strong three-point shooting year. I think he'll play a decent amount again, although I do believe that the additions of guys like Shabazz Napier and the extension for a guy like Joe Harris that could cut into his time a little bit. But he's always a safe play, especially if you're looking to sort of bolster three-pointers late in a draft. Andrew Wiggins at pick 117, fine, flyer pick, but I'm never drafting him. I'm just not. If he fits your team build, meaning a team build that can't shoot free throws, fine, but I don't punt free throws, so no thanks. Freddie Van Fleet at number 118. He was a guy that Trudell mentioned on yesterday's show also. I'm not convinced he's going to see enough playing time, but, and like Mike said, actually, he's a very good reality basketball player, and not sure if it's going to translate, but hopefully it will. Hopefully they'll give him time late in ball games. There's an opportunity there. The problem with Toronto, we saw it last year, and we don't know exactly how Nick Nurse is going to divvy up these bench minutes. What we heard, though, from Mike Bosetti was he felt like it wasn't just going to be a bench mob, and there might be some of these guys that sort of float to the top, and certainly Van Fleet, who just got himself an $18 million contract for a couple of years, he's got an opportunity here. I don't think he's a massive upside guy, though. This next dude is, massive upside and massive downside. This is your prototypical roll of the dice. Gallo at 119. I have no problem at all with taking Gallo in this range. In fact, basically anything beyond 90, I'm fine with. And I know you're like, but he's never going to play. Yeah, but I don't think it could be any worse than last year. Famous last words, right? I don't think it could. I really don't. At the risk of dropping a broadcaster jinx, I don't think that it could be any worse than a 14, what did he play? No, 21 games last year. He's never in the 70s. I think he cleared 70 games 2 times, and he's been in the NBA a decade. Mostly, I mean, here, we'll just rattle them off real quick. It's a podcast, so I can do whatever the hell I want. Throughout his career, we're going to eliminate the first season of his career because he just didn't play very much. So starting in 2009, 81 games, and you're like, what? This guy's going to be the bomb. And then 62, okay. 43, 71, oh, welcome back. Tore his ACL, 0. 59, 53, 63, oh no. 21, oh goodness. So if you're drafting Gallo, make sure that you understand if he can get to 60 games, that's a successful season. That's your hope. 60. That's not good. But when he's on the floor, he's a top 50 guy. Easy top 50 guy. He is elite at getting to and making free throws. He gives you threes. He gives you rebounds. He does, by the way, a little bit more in the defensive department than I think people give him credit for, although last year he really didn't get into it, and the previous season in Denver, not much either. But his per 36 is on steals is about 1, so not good, but, you know, not Julius Randle bad yet, although I guess he could get there this year. But the crazy, I mean, we're talking about a guy that over his career is making 87% of 5 free throws a game. And better than that lately. He shot 93% at the foul line this year. He was at 90% the year before that. He's been up around 90 once before in his career. This is a guy that is truly like top tier in a category, and you might be able to get him in the 10th round of your fantasy draft. If you're just okay, in head-to-head, by the way, I don't think I'd touch him. The injury thing is just too big of a deal in a head-to-head league. You can't have a guy just clanging up a roster spot. Roto, though, if you can milk 60 games out of Gallo, that's a big-time plus this late in a draft. So I have no problem with this pick. I love that he fell this far, and I would never recommend him in a head-to-head league. But at basically pick number 120, you take what you can, and as soon as you hear Gallo set to miss 8 weeks, you just dump him. Jaylen Brown, last pick in this mock draft at pick number 120. Maybe he fixes his free throw stroke, but not for me. Too many mouths to feed in Boston. Fantasy hole in Jaylen's game. God love him, though. He went to Cal, so go Bears. But just not there yet from a fantasy perspective. I think there's other guys I would take a flyer on at this point on a team where maybe there's just more shots available. Okay, long podcast today. Let's wrap this sucker up. Again, Wingspan is your coupon code. Wingspan, WINGSPAN, the coupon code if you want $3 off the draft guide. But the best thing you can do is go try to win it, because you'll find out if you won a draft guide by 11:59 tonight. Okay, maybe you won't find out because we're going to have to sort through all the entries, but you can guess before 11:59 tonight. We'll announce the winner tomorrow, and if you didn't win, you can still use the coupon code Wingspan and get $3 off the draft guide from its regular price. If we have a massive sale, if we hit that 250 mark, I don't think the coupon codes will be good on top of it, because then you'd basically be getting it for free. Still, when it's not on crazy sale, Wingspan. Thank you to Philip Rossman-Reich once more time for coming on the show. Philip_OMD at OMagicDaily. You can follow both those guys on Twitter. You can go to Orlando Magic Daily to check out all the good stuff at their website. Great things, by the way, because the Magic, hidden treasure trove. They might be the treasure trove of this coming season. Tough to say right now. But we have a little more info today than we did yesterday. I am Dan Besbris. You can join listener leagues, by the way. Going to keep dropping those now that more of you are tuning in for the first time on this podcast. Follow at Dan Besbris on Twitter or at Ball with Neil, or go to the Hoopball forums, hoop-ball.com, click on the forums tab, and post in the Hoopball Leagues thread. We'll get you situated that way. Again, you can tweet at us. We can get you situated in the Hoopball Listener League that way as well. They are growing, and I think a few of you heard my announcement yesterday because we got some requests. The more the merrier, folks. There's not a rush, but also, if you want to join one, we'd like to know as soon as possible because it makes our life easier. Coming up tomorrow, we will start the breakdown of the Industry Pro mock draft. Oh, baby, things are heating up. We got more guests. We got Mike Pellichet. We got Mike Possetti, who I mentioned, by the way. I've dropped his name on this one, but we actually haven't aired that interview yet. I realize after the fact you can hear him talk about the Raptors. That's coming up later this week. And then next week, we're going to start to talk to all the pros that were in the Industry mock draft to break down their team, picks they liked and picks they didn't like from that 9-cat Roto mock. We got so much good stuff on tap. Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.